All right, let's get started. Welcome to the Disability Organizers Forum, everyone. It is our first forum of 2023, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you and with some incredible speakers today. So my name is Jessica Lehman. I work as Executive Director of Senior and Disability Action, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we organize seniors and people with all kinds of disabilities to fight for housing, healthcare, all kinds of change in the community. And I am a white woman with shoulder length, straight brown hair. I'm wearing gold hoop earrings and a warm green sweater. And my background is a virtual background with a series of rainbow colored bubbles, I think you'd call them. So for folks that are new to the Organizers Forum, it's a project of the National Disability Leadership Alliance, which is a national cross-disability group of organizations working to increase the social and economic voice and power of disabled people around the country. And the Organizers Forum is designed to expand and support community organizing in disability communities. Okay. So we do a different topic every month. Sometimes we'll spend a couple months on a topic, but mark your calendars. We generally do the third Tuesday of each month at this time. I won't try to say the times because I'll get the time zones wrong. And some are on issues, some are on strategies about how do we organize in our own communities. We really try to bring an intersectional lens about how are we building a multiracial and cross-disability and fully inclusive disability movement. So we'll definitely bring that perspective to the call today as well. And we're always open to ideas. So if you have a topic you'd like to cover, please get in touch with me. So a note on collective access. Collective access is the concept that access is not an individual responsibility, but it's on all of us to create a fully accessible space, or as accessible as possible, I should say. Also recognizing that sometimes we have conflicting access needs. And so we work together as much as possible to make sure everyone can participate. So to that end, we are going to have everyone muted until we open for discussion. So please keep yourself muted until that time comes. We ask folks to use the chat minimally. We recognize that it's a good way for some folks to participate. And so if you have a question or comment and the chat is a good way for you to share it, go ahead and do that. But don't put a lot of extra comments in the chat because that can be distracting for folks with screen readers. And anything that is in the chat that's about the topic, I'll be sure to read out so that everyone has access to that. All right, so we're not going to do introductions today because there's so many of us, but we'll have a chance to share a little bit about who we are later when we get to discussion. So I do want to make a quick comment on our last call, our last two calls actually from November and December. We covered how to do hybrid meetings and events as a way to make events accessible to a really broad group of people. Not just people with disabilities, but working people and parents and, everyone who needs different ways to participate. And so we started working on an evolving guide to hybrid events, we're calling it. And I'm going to put that link in the chat. It is very basic so far, but it is open. So please add to it when you can. We also have a survey that we're asking folks to fill out about which cities and states around the country are, which governments are currently doing remote participation in their meetings to keep them accessible. So want to ask everyone to make sure you fill that out, at least somebody in your city or state, if possible. And I realize, even though I'm looking at the interpreter here, that in terms of access, forgot to mention a couple things. So thank you to Kat and Norma, our two ASL interpreters who are here today. They will be pinned or spotlighted the entire time. And they will speak up if we need to pause as they switch. We also have a live captioner. Thank you for being here. And if your captions are not showing up and you want them to, on the bottom of your screen, you probably have 3 dots and it'll say more. Or if you're on a tablet or a smartphone, it may say options. And if you click on that, you should have an option to show captions. And if they're distracting to you, you can hit hide captions to make them go away. Okay, I think I covered the access issues. Does anyone have anything to add that I may have forgotten just now? Okay, our captioner also shared with me. We have a link to look at the captions externally, and I just put that in the chat. So if that is more accessible, it'll have the captions show up in a different format. Feel free to do that. Okay, I think that is all of housekeeping. So let's get into our topic. So today's topic is the state of disability organizing. How are we doing around the country? And so we have 3 really wonderful leaders in disability communities, and we're going to have a conversation. We'll hear their insights on how much power they see that we've built in disability communities, what we need to be doing differently or what we can do better, and what is ahead for disability organizers in 2023. So a few things to stay grounded in. We know that we cannot get through this whole topic and talk about everything that needs to be discussed in the next 49 minutes. So we will have some unfinished business. There are topics that won't come up today that are still important. So that's okay. We can expect and accept a lack of closure. I also want to highlight that this is the organizers forum. And so we want to kind of highlight the difference between organizing and advocacy. That advocacy is individuals taking action on an issue, maybe trying to change a policy or a practice, and it may be one person or a group of people speaking for others and working on getting something changed. Organizing is when the people who are directly affected by that problem come together and are taking action as a group. So often we do them in tandem, right? And I think that's when we're most effective. But today we're going to focus on what's the organizing side that helps make change happen. And one thing that's exciting about our speakers is we have people coming with different experience and different perspectives to help us understand what does it look like to bring people together to have an impact on policy and practice. Okay, and I'm going to talk a lot about power in the questions that I'm going to ask our panelists. And there's a lot of definitions of power, but one is the ability to influence the behavior of people who can give you what you want, or the ability to change what's happening and directly influence decisions that have an impact on people's real lives. All right, so time to thank and introduce our speakers, and I'll invite them all to give a visual description of themselves. And as we get into this, I want to invite people to share your questions in the chat, and I'll incorporate those as we go, or you can hold some of your questions until the end. Okay, so first, I'm gonna actually, let me spotlight all of our folks to make this a little bit smoother. All right. Oh, wait, I thought I spotlighted Keri. Let me try that again. There we go. Now we've got everyone. All right. So first we have Keri Gray, who uses she and her. And Keri is CEO of the Keri Gray Consulting Group. She is a cancer survivor, entrepreneur, speaker, and facilitator. And the Keri Gray Consulting Group strives to create professional communities of understanding through disability and racial justice education. She is also founder of the National Alliance of Melanin Disabled Advocates, the Named Advocates, which creates space for disabled leaders of color and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, allies, to gather, learn, connect, and grow around racial and disability justice. And Keri's work has been featured in all kinds of amazing publications, and we can certainly share some of those in the chat and after the call. So thanks for being here, Keri. And I have to share full disclosure, Keri spoke at Senior and Disability Action's big fundraiser, our annual celebration a couple years ago on Zoom. And so that's where we first connected, and just really enjoyed her insights. And we also have Dom Kelly, who uses he and him. Dom is president and CEO of the brand new and very exciting organization, New Disabled South, which I can't wait to hear more about today. So New Disabled South is working to achieve liberation and justice for disabled people in 14 Southern states. And Dawn previously served as senior advisor for disability to Stacey Abrams on her gubernatorial campaign, and was a strategic advisor for disability at her voting rights organization, Fair Fight Action, for a few years before Stacey ran for governor. So welcome, Dawn. And our third speaker is Marlene Sallo, who uses she, her, or ella. And Marlene is the almost brand new 3 months in, executive director of the National Disability Rights Network. She has dedicated her entire career to advancing the rights of people with disabilities and defending the civil and human rights of all Americans. So Marlene, welcome to the new job and to the Organizers Forum. And before we go on, I'm going to pause and let you each offer a visual description. We'll start with Keri.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to meet and chat with y'all today and have some good stuff going on. So again, my name is Keri Gray, she, her pronouns. As a visual description, I am a light-skinned Black woman. I'm currently rocking tribal braids, which are half cornrows and half they gonna hang down with you, a little gold loop at the top. And I'm giving you earthy vibes. I'm giving you a green sweater, very dark background, brown couches, the plants, all of that. But that's me, and I look forward to chatting with y'all today.
I am Dom Kelly. I use he, him pronouns. I am a white man with brown curly hair, wearing a black corduroy button-down shirt, sitting in front of a bed, and I don't have the vibes that Keri has, but I do have a little dog sleeping behind me, curled up on a pillow, which is a vibe. So that's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marlene Sallo. That's how you pronounce it in Spanish. I'm Latina, shoulder length salt and pepper hair. I'm wearing black and taupe glasses today, a black blazer with a wine blouse with white polka dots, and I'm sporting my Auntie Waters lapel pin that says "Reclaiming My Time."
Thank you. And I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name. Can you say it one more time?
Marlene Sallo.
Marlene Sallo?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much for that correction.
Oh, no worries. Thank you.
All right, let's jump in. So I'm going to start with a big and open question. How do you think we're doing in terms of disability organizing? How strong are we as disability communities? And I'm going to give our speakers the option of who wants to go first.
Yes, I'll hop in. So this is Keri, and in terms of how we're doing, I would always say that there's ups and downs. There's things that we're doing well. There's things that we can improve upon. So in answering this question, I do think it's important to know the distinction between advocacy and organizing. Both incredibly important skills, both a lot of us probably do at some point or another, but they require different skill sets, which means that they each come with their own challenges, issues, and things of that nature. So when I think about disability organizing in terms of when we come together as a community, people with disabilities, we tend to be grounded in the principles and philosophies that ensure that we are doing an accessible form of organizing, right? So that means that we're taking into account that a group of people are getting together. Some of them may be blind, some of them may have prosthetics, some of them may have all these different things, right? And so a part of our planning process is being able to say, we got to take these things into consideration. We need a plan so we can all go in there together and come out together successful. So I think we've done that time and time again. I think the parts that get challenging is when we start organizing in the cross movement space, right? And so when we start organizing with organizations that are not grounded in disability justice, when we start organizing in spaces where they ain't even heard of, some of these concepts around disability inclusion. And so it's a challenge because my principles when it comes to organizing is that we can't just stay in the disability community. It is incredibly important that we are working alongside of various organizations. And so those are some barriers that we really it takes us going in there educating, it takes us going in there figuring out solutions, patience, all of these different things. So to answer your question, for me, I think that we are incredibly strong at disability organizing, but we definitely have some work to do when it comes to working with organizations outside of our network.
And sorry.
No, go ahead.
I agree with Keri, but I would also stress that groups outside of our network also need to educate themselves and make the effort to bring us into the fold and to give us the space that we deserve to do to educate them on the advocacy that is needed for our community. So I don't want to just put it on us, right? Like they also need to make that effort and have us at the table at all times.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I mean, that's spot on. I had a conversation with a progressive organization the other day where I asked them, what are you doing? What are you doing to advance disability justice? And they had no answer at all. And this is an organization that works for social justice. I wrote to a conference the other day, a philanthropy conference, whose theme was advancing justice, and there was no disability representation in this conference at all. So yeah, there's a lot more work to be done. And I guess the other thing I'll say too is I'm the fact that the Stacey Abrams campaign, I'm just talking about it because this was my last experience, was the first campaign to have a dedicated field program for disabled people, that we had field organizers that we hired to go out and organize the disability community in Georgia specifically, that we worked toward having an accessible field program across the board. Like it is 2023. We have a lot, there's a lot more work to be done to get other organizers, other organizations, candidates, elected officials to understand that like we are the largest minority group in the country and we can't be ignored.
Thank you. And on that note, Dom, I wonder if you want to start this off. I wanted to ask how much power do you feel like we have built in disability communities, and how do you assess that for yourself?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that our power has grown. I think at least I've noticed more recently that there are more I'm thinking in the progressive ecosystem, more folks kind of coming out of the woodwork and saying, hey, we haven't been thinking about disability at all. How do we do that? And yet, again, it's 2023, and I think that us not having the power that we should have is twofold. One, it is because we have not been invited into these spaces, that folks have not educated themselves enough to bring us into these spaces. And two, we have failed largely for years. And I say this as a white cis man in this space, to center the voices of multiply marginalized disabled people. And so the disability rights movement had been largely white male dominated and still is. And I think that is a failing of our movement and us as a people, and how we can move forward to build more power, because I know that multiply marginalized disabled people have not felt welcome into our space. And so and again, say that with acknowledging my own privilege in this space, but doing the work that I'm doing with my organization is focusing on centering those voices. Like, I am really trying to not be the voice. I want to do the work. Like I want to build the apparatus, but I don't want to be at the center of it. I'm going to center the people in rural Georgia, the Black and brown folks in rural Georgia who are living in poverty, who have no access to healthcare in their county. There's no doctor in their county, and they're suffering. Like, I'm going to center their voices, and I think for so long our movement has not done that. So I think those two things are the things that come to mind as like why we have not built the power that we could by now, but that we really need to, like, at this point, shit or get off the pot, so to speak.
Thank you. Keri, what would you say to that? How much power do you feel like we've built, and how do you measure that?
Yeah, I really wrestle with that question because it strikes a chord. So I identify as many things, but I also identify as a Black feminist. And I would love to use Nigerian feminist Chimamanda Adichie's definition of power in this. Quick plug. If you're interested in Black feminism at all, I highly recommend that you check out her work. She has a book called We Are All Feminists. We Should All Be Feminists, and a TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Story that is just powerful. So her definition of power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definite story of that person. And that strikes with me a lot when I think about this question, because when it comes to the disability movement, when it comes to Black Lives Matter movement, all of these issues that are incredibly important to us, I think we can pinpoint over and over again when we have felt that the power has been stripped from us in our community, and that narratives and all of these things keep presenting itself as defining what disabled means, right? Like, disabled means crazy, scary, all of these different things that come out in the stories that are told over and over again, right? And so when I think about how much power we have built, I definitely have to give a lot of like pride and recognition to those who have come before us. I mean, we have landmark legislation, the ADA. I was blessed to be born, the ADA was passed, but there are many countries that do not have that type of legislation, right? If you start thinking about our work in an international sense, there's so much that has already been built for us. The fact that we have a disability community and a disability movement to be able to claim our narrative in the way that we see it, I think is incredibly powerful. That being said, there are always pros and cons to this, because we would not be having this fight if we were not still trying to claim the power that our community deserves. And so some of those barriers, when it comes to it, when I think about her definition of power and the stories that are told about our community and what that holds, I think about our fight still against inspiration porn, right? That's still very much a battle and a barrier to seeing disabled people as people. I think about our battles with legislation, and I remember seeing a story just the other day. This was around the holidays, where New York was doing a sweep of all of their parks and public places of anyone who looked mentally disabled. Not even that they were. Not even that it was something that was going on, but they were doing a sweep to get anyone who even looked that way, to institutionalize them and place them in basically another prison industrial system, right? And so I think of legislation, and I think of the stigma. So with that, I think it very much brings us in a sense of a call to action, right? Like, I don't know about y'all. This is my personality. I'm a little spicy. And when I think about the movement, I'm like, my people deserve, disabled people deserve, Black people deserve, women, everybody deserves their rights, their inclusion, all of these things. And so it calls for us to step it up when it comes to our organizing, when it comes to our storytelling. Who are we advocating for? So I would invite that with all of us today to claim even more power.
I love that. It was interesting too, you mentioned the ADA, and of course, it's the thing related to disability that probably disabled and non-disabled people know about more than anything else. But I feel like the organizing stories don't get told. I had to learn a lot about disability history before I understood that there were town halls happening around the country, and that there were efforts to really get people on the ground mobilized around it, that it wasn't just something that happened in Washington, D.C. And, we need to make sure people know the power of that. So the last thing you said, Keri, was we need to step it up in our organizing and our storytelling. And so I want to ask you all, what does that look like for us to step it up in our organizing? And Marlene, we can start with you if you'd like, or we can start with someone else.
So I'm one of the panelists that has done less organizing and more policy advocacy, but at the end of the day, it's the storytelling that really brings home what is happening to an individual and what is happening within a community. Whether it's in person, or it's a video that you put on someone's website, or it's an interview or podcast. I think getting the stories out, amplifying it, lifting the voices and centering the voices of individuals with disabilities is key to any work that we need to get done. If I may, I'd love to give an example where we, in the state that I was at, we were doing some policy advocacy, and we actually got a meeting with the governor and the head of Health and Human Services for the state. And we brought some of our organizers with us, who spoke very frankly about what was happening to them, and the need for additional funding to help with their personal attendance or assistance. And it was moving. But along those lines, you could see the difference between those of us that do the legislative policy advocacy and the organizers, because they are so passionate. But in this particular instance, one of our newer advocates had not completely done his homework, and shared something with the governor that insulted him because it was wrong. It was inaccurate about his, I guess, legislative history in working on behalf of disability rights. And you immediately saw the governor stand up straight and almost come out of his chair. And it was more of I apologize. I should have, looked into it a little further, or perhaps I shouldn't have framed it that way. And then it's bringing the governor around, right, to understand that we're passionate about what we're doing. This means a lot to us. And this is how we perceive what's going on. And you have to respect our feelings, and it's not meant in a personal way. But at the end, we were able to agree as to what was needed. But it's that moment of being able to always tell your story and centering the experiences, those lived experiences, key to any advocacy that we're doing.
What a great story that, in telling our stories, we might ruffle some feathers, and that's okay. We got to keep doing it. Dom and Keri, what do you think? What does it mean to step it up in our organizing?
Yeah, I mean, I really agree on the storytelling piece. I also think that we need to think outside of the ways that we have historically organized. I will say that I think ADAPT is a great example of an organization that has really has changed, that really changed the game for organizing when they started, and took a really radical approach to organizing, which has been really effective, and at the same time today, because of the pandemic and the ongoing pandemic and the environment that we're in, it is not feasible for folks to go, do a sit-in at the state capitol to get policy change done. These things don't look the same anymore. So we need to, and I think disabled folks, we are innovative. We are usually ahead of the curve, especially when it comes to remote work, remote organizing. So we need to be thinking creatively at how we approach this. At New Disabled South, our biggest focus is coalition building. So we're thinking about disability justice organizing from a regional perspective, which there's been no regional work done in this country. So we're thinking about it regionally, and we're bringing all of these minds together so that we can think about, okay, how do we address policy issues, but how do we also find solutions to issues at the community level? Like, how do we come together to build mutual aid funds? Like, how do we get resources to people who need them in rural parts of the South? So I think we need to be more creative and strategic in how we approach organizing. And the example I'll give is right now in Georgia, we've got a waiting list for home and community-based services waivers of more than 7,000 people. There are over 655,000 people in the United States on these Medicaid waiver waiting lists. Over 500,000 of them are in the South. 7,000 is Georgia, but Texas has got 300 and something thousand. I mean, it's a crisis. Coupled with that, we have got a workforce shortage in the care economy. So direct service professionals here in Georgia, as an example, they're paid $10 an hour. That's the reimbursement rate. No one wants to do the work. So when you get a waiver, you wait for forever to get the services you need at home. Meanwhile, there are people in nursing homes and institutions. This is a crisis here. And there's been great work done by, organizations here in Georgia to try to advocate with legislators to get this done, but it's never gotten done. It is another year. Our governor's budget came out on Friday, and he funded 250 additional waiver slots when we had a bipartisan Senate study committee that just wrapped up at the end of last year that suggested 2,400 slots this year so that we can eliminate the waiting list in 3 years. The governor didn't listen, and he funded 250 slots. So now we're thinking, how do we approach this organizing together with these groups? It's not enough to have a lobbyist go down and talk to legislators. This means we're going to have to organize press conferences across the state, center the voices of people who are waiting on these waiver lists, tell their stories, get op-eds in newspapers across the country, get national media attention on the issue. get people together in their communities to organize, to show up where, at the Capitol together and fight for this. Like, this is the kind of organizing that we need to do, and that storytelling piece I think is really smart, and that's what we're trying to do with this issue here, and think about how we can do all of that also in a virtual environment, when we can't ask immunocompromised people to just show up at the Capitol for an advocacy day and talk to people for one day. Like, it's just not enough to do that anymore. We have to be really thoughtful and strategic and come at these issues from all angles.
Thank you, Dom. And I love that you highlighted there's all these different pieces, right? And so there's so many different ways for people to be able to participate. And I think that's always been a key part of organizing, is let's give people options, so that we can have people participating in whatever way works for them. Keri, do you want to add to that on what does it mean to step up our organizing?
Yeah, I want to give, like you said earlier, there are many options. Thankfully, there are many options. But one thing I would urge folks is to find a political home if you do not have one already. The story that you told earlier really resonated with me about being in a meeting and you really don't quite know what you're talking about. That resonated with me. I was like, listen, we done been there. You have to learn some things, right? And I say that because, we're people at the end of the day who just genuinely care about the work in which we're doing, but there's so much going on, and, you're strong in some areas and weak in others. And so when you join an organization that can help you, understand the current events, break down how you do things, describe different principles and philosophies, encourage you to debate them out and find them for yourself, it makes a difference. I've been a part of a multitude of organizations that have been foundational in me, being where I'm at today, right? So I was a part of the National Council for Independent Living. That was a political home for me for a while. I was a part of BYP 100, a Black Lives Organizing movement. That was a political home that taught me about Black queer politics and things. And I'm currently a part of an organization called Black Feminist Futures. I want to encourage y'all to check them out. They're putting together a Black homecoming this spring in Baltimore. I want to see y'all there. So when you join these organizations, they bring in curriculum, they bring in advocacy opportunities and organizing opportunities. All three of we all got organizations you could probably join. Look us up. But all of that to say, I think, surrounding yourself with people, with principles, with opportunities will evolve with you over the years.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for that, Keri. I want to ask, how do you see new people getting involved in disability organizing? Like, do you have an example of a time where you really saw new people coming into the movement, getting involved with something? And who were we reaching, right? As a white woman, I am right there with Dom about realizing that, and I use a wheelchair, right? It's people who look like me who have been at the forefront of disability organizing. And how are we reaching BIPOC folks? How are we reaching people with non-apparent disabilities, people who are queer and poor, and not just reaching people, but, creating space for people to take on leadership. So what do you see in terms of how we're getting folks involved and who, and of course, if you have any examples of that, we'd love to hear it.
I have to jump in because this is my
Yeah.
pet peeve. Representation at the top. I was the first Latina person of color to lead the Massachusetts Protection and Advocacy Agency. And I did not realize how much that meant to communities of color until I was in the job, where people would actually call and say, you look like me, you sound like me, so I can reach out and speak honestly about what I'm going through. There doesn't need to be any code switching, because you get me, right? I held, and within 90 days of starting, I held a voting rights event, statewide event. And the first thing that I did when I came in was I started reaching out to advocates across the US to connect me with advocates of color on the ground in Mass. And I remember there were about a dozen individuals of color in the audience, and we had over 100 participants. So that's not a lot. But I came to find out that was the most they'd ever had. And one lady who was a wheelchair user, was African-American, basically said, this is the first time that I've been invited to a disability advocacy event, because at the end of the day, what Dom was referring to is that those with intersecting identities were constantly being pushed to the corners and not centered. And so it is important to have that leadership that represents the communities that are being served. And that in and of itself organically opens up doors to welcome others that normally do not feel welcome. So
Yeah. I actually thought of you, Marlene, when Jessica asked this question, when I read this question ahead of time, because I was so thrilled when I saw that you were announced as ED, when I saw the press release come out, and the fact that it said you were the first person with a disability to lead the National Disability Rights Network. Like, I was like, how is it 2022 and you are the first person with a disability to lead this organization? And there are really great allies doing really phenomenal work. And like, we need to have our people leading this work. We need to put our people in leadership positions. A couple other thoughts. When I was on the Abrams campaign, we heard from students with disabilities. I can't remember what their acronym stands for, but they're a student organizing group at Georgia Southern University, which is in Statesboro, Georgia, which is, like, no offense to Georgia Southern, my brother-in-law went there. It is like middle of nowhere. It is not a progressive place to live. It is not a progressive institution. And there were disabled students organizing on their college campus, and they got involved with the campaign because they wanted to see progressive change in Georgia. Like, there are young people out there who are getting involved, and I think you're right, and about, you know, needing the like people who hold multiple identities being in leadership positions, because that's how you bring people on. And one thing that I have seen more of is more people being able to identify as having a disability, because I think that is not easy for people. I've had this conversation with my wife a lot. She's a Black woman, and in her family, they don't talk about disability. My brother-in-law is neurodivergent. And I love my in-laws, but they didn't talk about it. Like, that was not something that they could grapple with. He's now, as an adult, having to go and, like, understand what that means for him, and, like, find community, and it's a cultural thing. It's a regional thing. Growing up in the South, like, there's so many issues at play there. And one of the things I really appreciated on the Abrams campaign, although Stacey did not identify as having a disability, as a Black woman, getting up and talking about disability issues, the number of people who came to us and said, wow, the fact that you can talk about having a disability. We used identity first language most of the time, except when we talked about IDD community and when people preferred person first, but that a prominent figure could talk about disability. People came to us and said, wow, you made me feel okay that I can actually say I have a disability, I'm disabled. And they came to us wanting to get involved. Like, we need more of that, because it's not so easy for everybody to say, I'm disabled. Like, I've been disabled since birth, I have cerebral palsy, like, you can't miss it. But that's not the case for everybody. That's not the case for a lot of people. So we also need to open the door for people who are coming into their disability identity, to be able to understand what that means for their lives and see other people in leadership positions that are talking about it and making it okay to do that.
Absolutely. I'll hop in here. So I'm so glad that you mentioned the phenomenal, amazing, incredible Stacey Abrams. And I say that because when I think of folks coming into the movement, I think there are certain leaders that come around. There are certain experiences that happen in our country, in our community, that are so large that they call you to join, and I want folks to be on the lookout for those opportunities so intentionally. Sometimes it's coming, presidential elections come around, people are hyped. There are certain experiences, but and so the one that definitely comes to mind for me is the year of 2020. Oh Lord, I'm sure I don't want y'all to be sick and tired of hearing about 2020, but I still grapple with that year, because it was a year of people entering into the space for all the reasons: for the pandemic, for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for our elections. There was just so much happening. And I think, again, when I go back and I'm thinking about, this concept of people, experiences, and things of that nature, sometimes things just happen in life where you got to respond to it. And there's options, right? Some people, went to social media and said something, right? Some people went to the streets. Some people, there was so many different ways that you can get involved and ensure that we were going to have a fair and safe elections, to ensure that we were standing up against police brutality, to ensure that we were doing everything that we can to ensure safety in the midst of a pandemic, right? And so we're in 2023 now. And what I don't want to see happen is, even in the midst of us looking for these moments and these times where it calls to you, and you got to find where you can fit in. But what tends to happen is that we'll dwindle, right? And it'll kind of be the folks who are, I would say, local organizers are the ones who really hold it down year round, outside of the big epiphanies of life, right? And so what I want to encourage the folks in this space today is, again, thinking about where your political home sits and how your voice can be more constant for the community, right? Because I want you to enter. I definitely want you to enter into being an organizer, to be an advocate, to be a part of those moments, those historical opportunities of creating change. But I also want you to be someone that your community can rely on, that the folks around you can see the fact that this is something that you care about year round. And there's different ways in which you can be a part of that. I see a lot of potential for our community to move a lot further. And it takes us. That's what I believe.
That was so powerful. Thank you for that, Keri. I could ask you all questions all day, and I am tempted to convince you to do that. But the one thing that I think we'll end on today, just a teaser, is what is, on Keri's note, what is one issue or one opportunity that you think we as disability organizers have to get people involved, to make those voices constant and more powerful? So we're going to do that at the end. A couple comments from folks who are participating today. Comment from Shanika: it is so important to meet disabled BIPOC people where they are in terms of geography, education, and culture. That's how we build and sustain power in our movement. Thank you, Shanika. And then 2 questions. So one from Mark Johnson, a longtime disability organizer in Georgia. Thanks for being here, Mark. And he says, what role does rage play in organizing? And Olivia Billis has a question about, Olivia asks, advice for organizing in a college that is labeled as progressive, but is deeply ableist, pandemic specific, but not limited to this. So I'll invite any of our speakers to answer either of those questions.
I actually just want to comment on the rage question, which I think is like, I mean, rage is how we got, I say we as a community, 504, rage is how we got the ADA. I mean, that is foundational to our movement, and we should be angry. Like, we should be so fucking angry that there are hundreds of thousands of people waiting to receive care in their homes and are instead, some of them, forced into institutions in 2023. Like, we should be so angry that states across this country are making it more difficult for people to vote, that disabled people are being forced to stand in lines for hours. I saw people standing in line for 10 hours in the 2020 primary here in Georgia. I like, we should be so angry. We should be furious that I think it's 55% of Black and brown disabled men are arrested by the time they're 28. Like, we should be rageful, and we should use that rage to show up and stop playing nice with people who continue to invest in our carceral system, that we should stop playing nice with the people who continue to only fund 250 waiver slots in the budget. Like, we need to use that rage and demand that the people in power do better, because that's the only way we get it done. That's the only way we get it done. And it can be blocking the streets, you know, and it can be showing up at the Capitol and making noise. Like, we can do it in so many different ways, but we have to use the rage for good.
I could not agree more. Mark, we're running out of time, but that question, I could not agree more. I've been angry. I have been angry when I think about the violence that our communities have experienced, right? And I've been angry because we have not always received justice. Right. And so that definitely channels into the places that we show up, the work in which we do. And I agree with Dom that we should use that. One word of caution I would put with rage, and remember, I'm pro, but one word of caution that I would put is, you know, a lot of today's discussion was focused on the idea of organizing. And organizing is a team effort. It's folks coming together and strategically planning, how are we going to accomplish a goal, right? And so when you have some of your teammates, even yourself, where you're so angry that sometimes you want to kind of get out of position, right? And kind of do things your own way. I mention that because there's levels to this. It depends on the circumstances, but I name this because as someone who's organized in the disability community and the Black community and all of these spaces, I've seen us sometimes lose battles because we have not been able to grapple as a team together. And the emotions have kind of tore away our team dynamics. And that's an important thing for us to have. We got to still be able to work together. We got to treat each other well. We have to be able to get past the times when, it's not just the issue that's making us upset, but sometimes the people we work with is making us upset, right? So I say all of that to say that, you know, leverage your rage and your anger to help produce the power. And at the same time, I want to encourage us to figure out how we can stay as a unit and continue to support each other as the disability community.
Thank you so much for that. I'm realizing it's 58 after the hour, and we have to wrap up momentarily. A couple things. One of the questions on here is, what is the most effective way to pique interest when people are consumed with surviving all of the barriers they face? And we don't have time to give this a real answer right now, but I just want to connect it to this, the answers from Dom and Keri, excuse me, about rage and about helping people direct their anger, their frustration, the barriers they face, right? Like getting the emotion out of that and into taking action. And just want to totally agree with Keri. I think we've seen people, having reason to be angrier than ever and just tired from the world and taking it out on each other, right? And again, like working together to direct that so that we can fight together. So I'm going to let Marlene have the last word in a moment on kind of what you see as opportunities. And I know you've got a lot of policy experience. So if you have specific issues that you want to see us all focus on. And before I do that, I want to express huge thank you to everyone for being on the call. Dom Kelly, Keri Gray, and Marlene Sallo, who have just shared really wonderful insights, a lot for us to think about. And I will be sharing the recording and the transcript. It will be on SDA's website, and that's sdaction.org. And if folks aren't on the Google group, disability organizing at googlegroups.com, feel free to put a private message to me in the chat and I'll be sure to add you. Also, I mentioned we often do a second month on a topic. And so we will do our February call. What day is that in February? The third Tuesday of February is going to be February 21st. Same time. And so we invite all of our participants. Thanks for the comments and questions. Bring those back in February and we'll have some time to talk with each other about what we learned and what we think about it. And thank you to our captioners and interpreter. And I'm probably forgetting a thank you, but really appreciated everybody's comments and thoughts and participation today. And on that note, turn it over to Marlene.
So the two things that I think there's space now to really get movement across the US. The first thing is what Keri brought up is what's happening in New York City and even to a small part in California, where we're slowly seeing individuals with a mental health diagnoses being institutionalized for no darn reason, whether it's confirmed or not. So we need to push back on that. We do not want to go back to the 70s, which Geraldo Rivera did a wonderful expose on what was happening in Manhattan in that institution. We do not want to go back there. So we need to really think through this and work collectively to ensure that this wave that's happening in the West and the East Coast doesn't start moving towards the center. The next thing is voting rights, accessible voting rights. It's not just about people with disabilities. Your grandparents need access to accessible voting, right? So folks that live out in rural areas have the right to be able to vote by mail. So this is an issue that directly affects our community, but there is no reason why others in the community that do not identify as a person with a disability shouldn't be supportive of. And so this is also a way for us to really get out there and do the work to make sure that everyone has access to vote by mail and accessible voting and can get any and all accommodations that they need to cast their ballot privately and independently.
Thank you. Love that. So I am left with find your political home, tell your story, find your rage, come together and take action in whatever way works for you. Thank you to everybody. Take care and take action. Bye.